I'm Joshua Bardwell, and I'm going to tell you my final opinion of the Eachine Wizard X220. In the previous videos, I've had some positive things to say about this copter, but it won't surprise you to learn that at $140 for the plug-and-fly version, there are some compromises that have been made. So I'm going to tell you what those compromises are, and you can decide for yourself whether this copter is worth that price to you, or whether you'd rather spend a little bit more on something a little bit better. The first test of any copter for me is whether it flies decently, and this one does fly decently, as you could see in my freestyle video. This is a capable flyer, and if you buy this copter, you will get a copter that will teach you good things about what it's like to fly like a real legit copter. It doesn't have the same thrust or speed as a more expensive copter would, but especially for a beginner, that may even be a good thing. The handling and the tunability is not bad, but that is only true the day you take it out of the box. As soon as you start crashing this copter, it quickly gets substantially worse. So you can see here in a particular crash, not a particularly bad crash, this screw got pulled out. Now this is a steel screw, and presumably this is a steel standoff. Just got ripped right out. And you can see I had more than a few threads biting in there. This is actually more threads than the little tiny screws that came with it. I think they're probably 6mm screws that came with it, I would guess. And it just got ripped right out. Of course, now I've got this big old camera holder hanging off of there, putting some leverage on it, but I'm really surprised it got pulled out. I've never had that happen on any of the other copters I've used this with. The other thing that happened is that after the crash, the copter, the ESCs just started initializing randomly. They're not powering down. I can hear from the tones they're giving, they're losing the throttle signal. So they just sit there and they go doot, 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 right? And I don't know what the deal is there. Since they're all doing it, and since I know they're not losing power, I suspect that the flight controller may be having some problems. This even happened that while I was flying, the copter just dropped out of the air. And it wasn't a failsafe, so I strongly suspect that an ESC or the ESCs lost power or lost signal somehow. So to get straight to the point, I think that this is the best copter you can get for $140 for the plug-and-fly version. I don't think you could get a better copter for $140. And in fact, I went to my favorite discounts. I went to my RC Mart, actually, because I know at my RC Mart I could order every single thing that I wanted. And I tried to put together the cheapest copter that I could that I thought might match the performance of this or even beat it. And I came in around $199. I just don't think you can get a better flying copter than this for $140. But that being said, if you have more than $140 to spend, you should get a better copter than this. The problem with that is that going from about $140 here, you go up to, I think, at least $200, maybe even $250 to get into the range of something like the Diatone Crusader GT2 or the Shuriken X1, both of which are very good copters. They're just at a much higher price point. And if you're struggling to scrape together $300 and that's what you've got for your whole setup, this is definitely the one you should buy. But you should expect to be putting some work into it before all is said and done. If you do get this copter, I have some recommendations for you. Number one, you should put longer screws in. You should get some M3, I would say maybe 12mm screws, and you should put them in the top and the bottom. So you're going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the same with 12 of them. 12 M3, basically 12 or maybe 16mm. I think these are 30mm standoffs, so I think 16 would be really the longest you could go. So let's say 12mm. Screws, put them in the top and the bottom, and that'll help reinforce the standoffs and minimize the likelihood that any of them are going to strip out. If you run this copter, you must run it with the sidewalls in because they reinforce the top plate, and many people told me that if you run it without the sidewalls in, the top plate will break very, very quickly. Another thing you definitely need to do is you need to put some conformal coating or liquid electrical tape on these contacts here. These are exposed to the elements, and a person told me a story of landing in the wet grass. It shorted this, it started a fire, and it damaged his battery. Definitely need to cover this. The other thing people have told me is that if you take these screws in and out enough times, they will wear through the traces on this board, and likewise they'll create a short. They recommend that you use some M3 washers. Just do a Google search for M3 nylon washer, and you can find 200 of them for $2 somewhere and get those sent to you. Put M3 nylon washers on each of these screws. Another improvement that I wish I could advise you to make would be to upgrade the camera. The camera, like every single camera on every cheap ready-to-fly kit copter, is terrible light handling. Under the right lighting conditions, it's fine. If you only fly at high noon in the middle of the summer, you'll never notice this. But especially given that it's winter here, the sun is low in the sky, especially if I try to fly in the evening, even at like 4 o'clock in the evening, the camera, the whole ground just turns dark and muddy, and you cannot see where you're going. And you basically just have to keep the sun at your back like the whole time. So I would suggest you upgrade the camera to something like perhaps a Runcam Swift, or even an 1177 should do better. But the problem with that is that now you're looking at a $25 to $40 upgrade to a $140 copter, and it's starting to sound like a much more expensive copter, and maybe you should just buy a different copter instead. So there you go. That's my final word on this copter. It is, I think, the best copter on the market that you can buy for $140. But if you could spend more than that, you absolutely should. And if you do buy this copter, make the upgrades and improvements that I recommended, the longer bolts and so on and so on. They will help improve the longevity. The other thing I would suggest is just buy a spare flight controller. Odds are good that you're going to end up replacing the flight controller when it craps out on you. Well, I hope that all has been educational for you. I hope it's helped you make a decision about whether you want to buy this copter. Check the video description. There's a playlist where I've got all the videos talking about the Eachine Wizard, including a few that I haven't posted yet as of today, but I will in the future. How to install the receiver, how to do any of the other upgrades that I've talked about to help you get this copter in the best possible shape it can be. Thanks for watching, and as always, happy flying. Even with, it is a good copter, but not a perfect copter. Happy flying.